This is going to be far from an in-depth demo of XM Cloud. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of pieces that you can do. There's a lot of decisions that you can make when you go. But I did want to, especially for those that didn't get the benefit of seeing symposium presentations, et cetera, show a little bit about what this is about, a little bit of what we've been talking about tonight, and bridge some of the conversations that we've seen earlier with what is actually there. So I'm going to start with, when you first log in to the new Sitecore Cloud portal, this is what you're presented with. And in this case, I'm running an instance that only has the XM Cloud projects connected. If you're on any of the other Sitecore Cloud products, such as Personalize, such as Content Hub, et cetera, you start to see some other pieces filter in here. But for today, we're keeping it simple. This instance is not connected to those other tools, although it very easily can be. So what we have is we have a very simple site that we set up and literally started setting this up this afternoon. It's that easy and simple to get through. Unfortunately, the provisioning process does take an hour or so, so a little bit much to show in the course of this. But this is your portal. You have access to view your projects, which is going to bring you to the deploy portal, deploy.sitecorecloud.io, which is really just going to show you, if my Wi-Fi would cooperate, there we go, what you have out there. So in this case, I have our agency queue, XM Cloud. We are actually one of the ones that's in the progress of migrating our own site. It's one of the things that we believe in, that we not only sell it, but we're also Sitecore customers ourselves. We use the XM Cloud, we use Content Hub, we use CDP. So I have, first and foremost, I have my environments that I can click in and I can see. And just as easily as going ahead and saying, hey, I'm going to need a production environment. Yep, production is going to be a production environment, believe it or not. And I'm going to go ahead and not link that into my source control at all, because there's other deployment methodologies that I can use. But just as easily as this, 4 inputs, and I'm putting together a new environment for my Sitecore instance. And we will see, I'll come back to it here in a little bit, but we can see right here where it's in progress, it's going to spin up, and before the end of this demo, we're going to have a production environment ready and available for us to deploy to. Additionally, in addition to this, I have the ability, I can see my front-end host here, which is hosted by our friends at Russell over here. So I can click in, actually see, preview of our site that we'll get into in just a couple minutes here. And then I have a few other views that I can get to. So I have my Explorer view, where I can click through, start seeing some of the details of what I've put together. Right now I only have a home page, so it's not a very interesting view, but you can see where you start to see your site hierarchy and et cetera. You can go through, you can start editing your page details. Some of the things that you've traditionally done in Content Editor are going to go ahead and be available. I can start editing some of this content. What's my navigation going to look like? What's my title? What's my core page content? Sitemap settings. As I start to expand this and add some of the SXA properties and et cetera, I can also start managing things like what are my open graph properties, et cetera. All the things that we've traditionally managed at the page level, even in this type of headless scenario, will be there. I also, that this can, in addition, go ahead and manage multi-site. So I only have one that I'm going to be showing here today, but if you have multiple sites managed under your XM Cloud instance, you're going to see them all here, all in one place. This is one pane of glass for all of your properties. Additionally, I have available to me, and we'll get in and we'll start populating some content into here in a few minutes, but I have the new Pages interface. This is, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the core replacement for Experience Editor, which is no longer available in the XM Cloud infrastructure. And I personally believe once you get past some of the growing pains, some of the learnings, that's a positive. That this is much better. It's, in my mind, a lot of where the Horizon editor tried and failed to go. But it's going to allow us to do a lot of our kind of drag and drop presentation editing. And I'm going to show when we go in here and we start editing some things, where with very little customization, we can, not necessarily build out our styles and our look and feel and et cetera. Obviously, that's always going to be something that's custom. That's part and parcel of our brand. It's very close and dear to us. We're always going to make that a custom piece. But I can go in here with what is pretty much an out-of-the-box installation. And I'm going to take our Agency Q homepage and I'm going to start to pull that in. And I'll show you the couple of places where I've already customized it, but it's very few and far between. And then I don't want to spend a lot of time in it, because I think almost everybody in the room has been here, has seen it. But I do want to show that our old familiar friend, content editor, is still here. Okay? Still available to us. While the Pages interface is great, the Explorer interface is great, there's a lot of things that we can't necessarily do very easily through there. So having this old familiar piece still there, still being able to go in and see in the same ways I always have, even though I'm editing it in new and interesting ways, I can still see my presentation details. It's one of the things we talked about earlier that can be a tricky piece with Sitecore, always, right? Especially when you're dealing with migrations, especially when you're doing a major architecture change, et cetera. And I can still see all the things that we're used to seeing there. I can still edit all the things that we're used to editing there. Which is going to bring some familiar comfort there. So I'm going to go ahead and click back to Pages and begin the process of editing. So I will go ahead and navigate over here on my left-hand bar to my components, which is going to give me a list of components. Now, for the most part, no, actually, I'm sorry, not for the most part. All I've added is variants. These are what you get out of the box with the SXA implementation that ships with XM Cloud. Okay? We can choose to clear those out. In most cases, we probably will. For the sake of this demo, we'll leave them there. I'll put my navigation up top. I won't get into that too much, but I'm going to go ahead and grab my hero. And while I'm not going to make everything, again, we're not doing styling, we're doing structure here, but I can go ahead and drop page content in. Now, one of the things that I have done is I have gone ahead and added in for my content, page content. If I look under my advanced styling over here in my right pane, I have variants, and I have gone ahead and added in a hero variant. I can go ahead and within my container, select my container. I can go ahead and do things like add a background, or for my background options, let's go ahead and choose cover. For my type, I can center my content in it. I can go ahead and maybe I want to give it a little bit more space from top and bottom. All those things are available to me through a lot of the standard SXA type editing interface that we've been used to. Again, I'm not getting styling because I haven't done styling yet. But once I start to get the structure in here and decide how I'm going to use the components, add in my components, add in my rendering variants, I can go ahead and begin handing that off to my front-end team or my design team to begin applying a look and feel to it. I'm going to go ahead and use, for my next section, is putting people first, coming off of our site. I'm going to go ahead, I did earlier, go ahead and create some promo content. I'm going to assign that. Now notice that my initial promo doesn't exactly look like I would want it to, right, based on what I just showed you. But I'm once again going to go into my rendering variants. And I've added 2 rendering variants, one for the image at the left, one for the image at the right. I'm going to go ahead and select right image. And you'll see, again, my styling, my placement doesn't look perfect yet. But just as easily as having gone into my Visual Studio Code, added in a new rendering variant, doing a matching rendering variant inside my presentation over here. So just looking at my headless variants. This promo came out of the box. All I did was add a left image and a right image and put a little bit of code into my Next.js components, and away we go.
Hey, Steve, have you played with any kind of like non-image media yet in XM Cloud?
I have not, to be completely honest. I would expect it to be a very similar experience, though.
And you can create your own stuff too, so
You
obviously, yeah.
I'll go ahead and, once again, just to show the use of different variants, I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to see the same thing, right? This kind of stacked CTA that doesn't quite do what we want it to do. I'm going to select a new variant, left image, and boom. I can start dropping in, have a container here. Let's go ahead and do a column splitter. Just going to let us kind of modify our overall layout. Then the column splitter, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, I want 4 columns ultimately. So let's go ahead and get those 4 in there. I can, in the typical bootstrap style, say, hey, I want that to be 3. We're using a 12-column grid. So if I want 4 and I want them evenly spaced, I'm going to do 3 each. And I'm going to start, because I'm trying to mimic essentially this here, I'm going to start dropping promos into each one of these. Okay, so I can drop an ROI promo. I'm going to drop revenue promo. Acquisition costs, we're going to have one more, 30% uplift in retention. We're going to go ahead and do that one from scratch. So, again, drop a promo on. I say, hey, I want to go ahead and create that in my data folder for this page or this item. I can also do it inside my promos folder up here for shared content, more easily shared content to use. I'm going to say that this is, what did I say it was? Retention, uplift in retention. Trying to type on this podium is a lot harder.
So much pressure on a live demo.
There always is.
Yep. Bravo for that.
We will go ahead and select our image. This is where I started to say, the question came up earlier as far as that, how familiar might you be, right? A lot of this looks very familiar. Right? This looks a lot like going and selecting an item out of the media library in Content Editor, Experience Editor. So if you're familiar with Sitecore, this is all going to feel reasonably comfortable. And then here, I can simply say 30%. Now notice all my text, while on kind of my reference here, it's all, of course it's sized and styled, but it's all censored. And I'm going to want that in my structure, so it's just as simple as going in and clicking each one of these and saying, hey, am I styling? Center the items. And we're inheriting an awful lot of that functionality. We can go in, we can customize it, we can play with it, we can make it ours, but we're getting a lot of that from SXM. So if you're familiar with building sites in SXM, this is going to be, again, very, very comfortable. Once I get to here, and this is as much as I'm going to do with this at the moment, I can go ahead and publish it. And one of the things that we're going to see once this publishing is complete, in my very non-pretty site, because I haven't handed it over to the designers in the front end. Something that Lori gets frustrated with me about all the time. Sometimes I never end up handing it over to them. I take it one with it myself. We are eventually going to see some deployment activity kick off once I do my publishing, which is ultimately going to land this on our Vercel instance, hosting our front end, etc. We're also going to be able to, let's see, while we're waiting for that, if I go back to my project, what do we got? Okay, our production instance is up. Been running. We'll get to how to use that in just a minute. Let's see if our page is finished publishing. Unfortunately, my Wi-Fi is not doing the greatest down here. I apologize for that. But once we are done deploying, we will ultimately end up seeing. Let's see if it's even initiated. Log into Vercel here, and we'll see. So again, the dangers of live demos. All right, looks like it decided to finish publishing it. And boom. It doesn't match everything that we had on the reference site, but this was done in 2 hours this afternoon. It really has made a lot of that kind of base functionality, that base structure, et cetera, that simple. Now that I have my environment ready over here, we're going to go ahead and look at a couple things. One of the first things that I can do is I don't actually have a site yet on this, so I will go ahead and create that. It'll be a fairly simple process. Create the website. It'll take a couple minutes to do that. Once I do that, I'll be able to go back in and both connect it to the front-end hosting as well as be able to publish my content code, etc., all the way through.
So what is it doing here?
What it's doing right here is really provisioning. If I had gone ahead and, I don't even know if it would let me anymore, I know early on you could. If I had gone into Content Editor for this, you'd see that there was no site yet. Okay? It was just a base install of SiteCore. So really what it's doing right now is the things that you would have done in Content Editor previously with creating a new tenant, creating a new site, all of that. That's all automated through scripting. I just went in, told it what the name I wanted was. We no longer have a lot of the options that we did, right? Because we're only creating JSS headless tenants now.
So was that doing the things that you would do by creating like site definitions in config files, or was
Yes.
that creating a bunch of content items?
Both.
I think it's the SXA, when you generate a site in SXA,
Right.
what it does.
Okay.
So back here, once upon a time, I would have gone here and said, hey, create a new headless site.
Okay.
And it would do a lot of that. And then, yes, you would go into your Visual Studio solution, probably Stitch Automated. Technically, you could configure. It's really, in an automatic way, walking through this create a new headless site.
Okay.
that because I have no idea what it's going to do if I try to do that manually. That's not something I'm willing to try on a live demo. But over here now, I have that site. Let's go ahead. Don't have much of a site post game, so I'm going to go ahead and select an existing Vercel installation. It's chosen a project name for me. I can leave that alone. I probably will because the naming convention happens to be pretty predictable, even if a little verbose, it's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And this is going to take just a moment to go through, but that's literally all I had to do. It's literally all I had to do. Now my front-end hosting is set up. In theory.
And so what was it doing there?
Well, what it was doing there is if I go in and I were to, in the Vercel interface, and guys, please feel free to bail me out and jump in if I miss. But I'd have a lot of settings I got to go in here and do, right? I got to go in and not only configure all of my build process, my webhooks, my environment variables, any deployment protection, security, et cetera I have. All of this, I would need to go in and manually, if I were going to do this with Sitecore XM on-prem, 10.2 version, I got to grab all these, I got to set it up, I got to configure it right, I got to config into my repo, make all that work. It's not that hard. Somebody can do it in a couple hours, get it up and running, get it all tested, get it smooth. But this just does it in a click because it already knows all this detail.
2 minutes is a lot better than 2 hours.
What's that?
2 minutes is a lot better than 2 hours.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And now just that easy, I probably don't have anything in it yet because I haven't published anything. Yep. But I have a site, I have all the underpinnings. And now the other thing that it has for me is deployment pipeline. So one of the things that I can do here is I can now go and say, hey, you know what? I like where this has ended up. This site, although I might make a lot of my people cry if I were to actually deploy it, it's ready to deploy, right? It's great, it's perfect, it says everything we wanted to say.
We do have designers here too, don't worry.
Yeah, but I'm a developer, I don't care.
This looks good enough.
So therefore, I'm going to go ahead and promote this to production. And in order to do that, let's see, I can go in, I can grab one of my deployments here. Notice I can grab any of them. I'm going to grab the latest one. Grab one of my deployments, and I can simply say, hey, deploy this to this build artifact out. Now there's some other things that if I wanted to move all that content and et cetera that we just did, I would have to do some things with my serialization, et cetera, that are going to be outside the scope of anything that I can do here in one session. But what we're going to see when I go in, that some of everything that I did as far as any of my code and et cetera, any of my artifacts here are going to go ahead and go out. I have a nice, clean, build once, deploy many. Notice that this deployed at my discretion when I told it to, not because something went into a source control repository, et cetera, somewhere. So nice, clean, easy. This portal gives us all the tools that we need. And there's obviously going to be a lot of cases where we want to customize it. We could get into a lot of things. There's some YAML files and et cetera back there that are going to tell it what to do when you say build, what to do when you say deploy. And if you go out to the Sitecore documentation site, which we now have all kinds of nice, neat, clean links over to, right through the portal here. That's another thing that it brings central is all that documentation and information that we might want. Brian, I think we're all pretty familiar with Sitecore doc at this point, but it's nice to have it in one place. There's a lot of documentation out here about how we can customize the installation, how we can customize the deployment process through Google Files, etc. But it gives us all of this core infrastructure that we may have spent hours or even days setting up in the past. We now at least have a foundation that we start with without having to touch anything. And it's also because it's got this uniformity starting out, because there's all these starter kit pieces in there, et cetera, it's going to start to give us a lot of uniformity, not just across Sitecore implementations within our own agency, but across the board, right? Because everybody's starting from the same place. I think that's going to be one of the neat carry-on effects that we're going to get here. Even if it means that those of us who have been at it for a while are losing our web forms and we. So I agree with you, I kind of mourn it, but you're right, purpose-built technology fits a lot better. Questions? Yeah,
Oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
the Edge is hosted in, at, like, where are you hosted?
Edge is automatically linked in.
And where it's hosted right now, on Sitecore side, or you have your own, like, instance where you
On the
host?
Sitecore side. I haven't tried it. I imagine you could probably stand up your own instance of Edge somewhere else and connect in through
Right.
the APIs to GraphQL. Hard pressed to think right now, off the top of my head, of the edge case where you're allowed to do it. But from everything I've seen, in theory, it would be possible.
What was the front-end framework that was driving the actual visitor experience?
The front end, I am in this case, and it really is the default, although you could set up a project with any of it. I'm using Next.js.
Next.js?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's...
There are starter kits and et cetera out there for vanilla create React app, for Angular, for et cetera, but really the front end framework that is most developed and they give you the most in-depth and built out Sitecore driven components, et cetera, you inherit the most already completed work really is on the Next.js starter kit.
So that's what's kind of driving the options on the right-hand panel when you were talking about render options?
No, what's driving a lot of that's actually a lot of property-driven stuff, and then my Next.js components become aware of what those properties are.
I see.
But realistically, a lot of that is just what we've seen forever in, for instance, a lot's coming, spacing, add highlight, this stuff's all coming out of, these are all the SXA properties that we've been familiar with and adding to for years. Fortunately, it's all still there. And Marcus?
Yeah, so when you were like kind of drag and dropping different like components in the editor, is there like any way to have it like have different layouts? So like that's like a desktop layout, is there a mobile layout that it can kind of be like set into or?
Yep, I didn't pay any attention to mobile when I threw this demo together, so it's not going to look very good. Like right there, you can start to see it. Now, in typical fashion, there are ways we can do it. There are things that we can bake into our templates. There are things that we can enable in Content Editor that will allow device detection, but out of the box, the default here is responsive. Right? That's what we're all doing for the most part anymore. So. Any other questions?
So when you hit publish on that item, what was it doing there?
It's really doing two things now. It's doing the same thing that it's done for a long time. It's moving items from my master to my web database. That's always been the core premise of Publish and Sitecore, it still is. Those databases still exist back there. And in fact, there's ways in my site configs and et cetera that I can choose which database I'm pointing to if I wanted to do like a preview site, et cetera. So all of that is still there. So it's doing what the traditional Sitecore Publish is. It's moving from master to web. In addition to that, it is kicking off some things in the back for incremental static generation or even static site generation, if that's the mode that you have created your Next.js app in, and et cetera, where it's triggered that webhook and it's causing your site to build and refresh that content. As you kind of touched on in your presentation, depending on how you choose to structure things, you might be using SSR solely, SSG, ISG, any of it, all the acronyms put together at once. So exactly what happens in that build process is going to depend on your architecture there. It's going to publish it to the database, and then it's going to trigger whatever build process you need to get that change live.
Awesome. So due to time, we're going to wrap up. We got